Hello, divine creations, divine marvels, children of God. So let's just ask Bruno for his help to receive the energy of God. Help us to know the truth, to guide this community hour, not just me doing the talking, but to guide each one of us, to guide and help in everything. Bruno Groening, Bruno Groening had the audacity, the nerve to say that that we need God, and to say that we can have a direct connection with God. Bruno said he would help. He would help that to happen until we can do it on our own. He had the audacity to say, he never discouraged. In fact, according to Greta Hausler, he encouraged people to go to church, but most importantly, to practice what was taught in church. But my understanding of what Bruno taught really is that we don't need anyone or anything other than God, and we can have that direct connection. And this just flies in the face of many of the structures that have been built up around God, around great teachers, great masters, around prophets. There's all these structures and rules, and it's like before you get to God, you have to join this group and pledge allegiance to them and go to this meeting every week, and some traditions every day, and you have to read this book, you have to wear these clothes, and you have to not eat these certain foods. And Bruno Groening, he didn't criticize, that I'm aware of, he didn't criticize a particular tradition, but he did point out that we can have a direct connection. He pointed out that most people need a mediator, but not a human mediator, not a building or a book but a spiritual friend. And he never claimed to be the only mediator that I'm aware of. I call, in trying to describe all this, I sometimes call that religious consciousness, the idea that we need a book or a preacher or a building or a ritual. I'm not opposed to those things. I participate in all of them. And in some ways, I kind of am a preacher. So I'm not saying those things are bad, but the idea that we need those things. It's one thing to, those things are helpful, or to read a little here and there, but the idea that we need anything other than God, or anything other than what I'm going to call a pure helper, which I consider Bruno to be, and which I consider Christ to be. And because basically what Bruno said is God sends us this thing. He calls it the life stream, the healing stream, the Heilstrom, the divine force, the divine power, the healing wave. He used many different words to describe this thing that God sends us. And that's what we need. and everything else is at best supports us in it connecting to that, and at worst it distracts us from that, or it makes how to say it, it just makes a structure, and it dilutes the truth. The truth is, Bruno Groening said it, you can receive the Heilstrom anywhere. And then these certain structures that, well-meaning yet misled people, and I've done it, and I don't, but enough. Okay, let me keep it really simple. So here's the truth. God sends us this thing, the healing stream, the Heilstrom. We can receive it anywhere and everywhere. And then all these human structures get built up around it that say, well, you can only receive God's grace or God's help. Because what is the Heilstrom? It's God's help. It's so much more than that, but let's keep it simple. It's the help and grace of God. And it's like, well, you can only receive the help or grace of God if you belong to this denomination, or go to this church, or go to this church on this day, or don't eat this food, or read this book. Don't read those books. If you do these activities, then you're totally cut off from the grace of God. And Bruno Groening, without really criticizing that, he just pointed out that actually that none of those things are true. Yes, certain activities bring us closer to God, and certain activities bring us further from God, but not in the sense of a rule book or a law book. Bruno said to be connected to God, that is everything. And I think one of the, and she's not here today, but one of the greatest lessons in Bruno Groening's teaching came from one of you. And she's not here, Ulrike, very regular attender. She was having, doubts, and had all these, she had a moment of just doubts and questions and worry. So she was like flipping through her Bible. She's very devoted to Christ, looking for answers. And then she said that she heard Jesus's voice and said, close the book and open your hands. I'm paraphrasing here. Close the book and open your hands and receive. And I don't know that I can summarize, I always am looking for how to summarize Bruno Groening's teaching. I think that's the best summary I've ever heard. Bruno himself said, if you observe your body, the truth will reveal itself inside of you. So I'm not saying don't go to church. I'm not saying don't read the Bible. I love the Bible. I love churches. I go to church on and off. What I'm saying is, don't put anything before God. Don't put anything man-made before God. We've been told spiritual books, spiritual buildings, spiritual teachers, that those things are all more important than God. And I say we've been taught wrongly. Bruno says we've been taught wrongly, and I say those are very specific ways we've been taught wrongly. That, many, in the Jewish tradition and the Christian tradition, there's this idea of idols. Don't make idols. Well, I think that's the true definition of an idol. Putting Um, and so it's not like we have to go out and criticize um, religion or criticize traditions. That doesn't help. It doesn't help us or the other person, but we have to free ourselves. We have to free ourselves from the idea. We have to follow God. And God is not a book. God is not a building, and God is not a preacher. God is not Bruno Groening. The best, at its best, a church or a book or a preacher will point you to God. At its worst, it becomes an idol, or we get fixated on that instead of fixated on the real solution to our problems. Like I was like, okay, well, what am I doing? Like, what? I'm, as I was getting ready for this community hour, and I was like, well, I wish. I mean, I wish there was a building or a denomination that if we joined, like everything would be fine. And I wish that I could just like make all of you well and happy. And I can't. Bruno Groening couldn't. Many people went and saw and had personal contact with Bruno Groening and didn't experience a healing. So and Bruno would say things like, don't think that it depends on a small person such as me. He even once said, let's see if I have it handy. No, I don't have it handy right now. He once said, it doesn't depend on a small person such as me or the almighty power of God. It depends on the person. Meaning, my understanding, and that's a paraphrase, but it's almost exact. And my understanding of what that means is there's things we have to do to turn to the almighty power to receive it. But we can block it. That's the long and short of it is God's given us free will. God doesn't force happiness or health on any of us. And we have to, if we want to be happy and healthy, there are things we have to do. We can ask for help, and Bruno encouraged people not just to ask, but to plead for help. To beg. And there's kind of this idea of like, the way I was raised is like, God, Jesus will just take care of everything. I don't have to do anything. That's how I was raised. And that's kind of the mainstay of the Protestant tradition, which is the second largest Christian tradition in the world. So let's reflect on all this for a little bit. Let's take down our idols and let's turn to God and let's ask a helper we trust, such as Bruno, such as Christ, to help us have that connection. Bruno Groening said, because whoever trusts only God has not built on sand. Now, again, that doesn't mean don't go to church, don't read books. I'm not saying don't do that. And I don't believe that's what Bruno's saying, but what Bruno is saying is don't put your faith in those things. Don't put your trust, don't put our trust with a capital T. Like, oh, going to church is going to save me. Oh, studying this scripture is going to save me. Oh, having this belief, which is what, an idea in our head, oh, that's going to save me. Bruno Groening basically says, no, God will save you. Bruno said, because whoever trusts only God has not built on sand. So there is one, I don't want to say exception, there's one clause to that, and that's the need for a spiritual helper. Bruno spoke about that often. He said, you don't have to have faith in me, but you do need to trust in me. Until we don't, until we're able to have complete trust in God. The parable, we read a couple days ago, the pearl of great price. Let me see if I can find my Bible real quick. I'm just laughing at the irony of I'm like, don't put your faith in a book, and here, let me read to you from a book. And I believe what I'm about to read is going to say the same thing. So, this is Matthew 13:45. 13:44. The kingdom of heaven is like a very precious treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and hid again. Then in his joy he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls. And upon finding a single pearl of great value, he went and sold all that he had to buy it. So I personally don't believe Christ is talking about a book, a church, a denomination. I think he's talking about God and talking about our soul. So I'm no monk. I read spiritual books. I go to spiritual gatherings, less and less, but I go to these gatherings. Those things are very supportive and nourishing, and they're not they're not it for me. I really like going to church, but I wouldn't sell all my possessions to have the right to go to church, and I really cherish these meetings. But I wouldn't sell everything I own just to be able to give these meetings, to give. When I think about a spiritual helper, I ask myself, who would I trust my soul to? Who would I trust not just this life, but my journey to? And Bruno Groening is such a person for me. It's like, what would we give up everything for? And for me, it's God. Or, and this is my own just personal, or a really deep connection with a true helper. Because I know that a true helper, if I, you know, make effort, will lead me to God. Oops. Bruno said, once a person has understood himself, he will know that he is a divine creature. He will know that he is a child of God, and then he will know what a wonderful body he has. He will know then how to use it properly. He will know then how to take in the divine power, and he will know then how to manage his body. He will know then how to take in so much good, that he has so much of it to be able to share with his neighbor, and so much more. So, I just don't know how to language it except to say, that, well, Bruno languaged it so well that the human being can be compared to a battery. And if we want things to go well, we need to keep our battery fully charged. Actually, it's very simple to language. Bruno made it very simple. Oh, how I wish life wasn't full of, I won't say full of, that life didn't have challenge. And it does. And Bruno tells us how to face those challenges, to charge our batteries every day. I do it multiple times a day. And I've realized, it can just be 10 seconds. When we're in a pinch, that's obviously, like if you just tune in for 10 seconds every day and that's it, that's probably not going to cut it. If it, um, and there are lots of challenges in life and how to face them. Well, Bruno said with faith and with fully charged batteries. So, we'll be doing this again tonight at 7 p.m. Don't know about tomorrow. I'll send an email. For anyone who's new, let's see. First of all, hi Rita. Thank you. Namaste, Gita. Thanks for asking, Germana. I'm currently exploring just having people ask individually. I do want to start doing specific prayer meetings. And the reason why I'm doing it that way is my understanding that's how Bruno led meetings. So I'm just trying that out. And of course, you're welcome, Nikki. So, yeah. But I personally asked, seeing that you put up that prayer request. And so, what does it mean to follow God? Because I think that's what Bruno's teaching is all about. And my hope is that what I've shared today is an accurate expression of what Bruno meant by that. Bruno said, let's see if I can find it. Yeah, I think I can. He said, you can't stand the direct current of course, meaning the direct energy of God. He said that human beings had fallen so far away that they couldn't take it in directly anymore. So that's really the one exception to everything I've talked about today. Today I've talked about trusting God, having a direct connection to God, not making idols out of spiritual or religious structures. And the one exception to that is our need for a spiritual friend, helper, such as Bruno Groening, until we can. Bruno said, I want you to be able to stand on your own 2 feet and to be able to absorb the current directly. And so my hope is that I've accurately expressed Bruno's teachings on this subject, and because it's not just a teaching, it's a path, it's a way of life. We can look to people, places, and it's not just about spirituality or religion. We can look to people, places, and things to complete us, or we can look to God. And there's that very fine line of a need for a helper, and it's even more. That's not a fine line. I mean, there's a line about, needing, and then there's a very fine line about things like spiritual books, spiritual gatherings, preachers, meaning someone who talks about the truth but hasn't fully realized it, isn't a full expression of it. I put myself in that category. I'm not a master. And so there's a very fine line there where we need to discern whether such things are helpful and or if we're sort of putting those things before God. It's like, and we do that till we don't. I catch myself all day long, thinking like, oh, that would make me happy, or oh, that would complete me, or oh. So it's a path I'm on. So basically, most of what I talk about, the things that I need to learn, the things that I know and that I need to practice more deeply. That's my style of teaching. The things that I know intellectually that I practice a little bit and that I need to practice even more. So again, we'll be here tonight at 7. Tomorrow, it's a bit of a mystery. We'll send out an email. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much to everyone for joining in today. And let's take a minute and really plead for God's mercy. Any specific situations or people that we want to ask for? Now let's dedicate our life to becoming clearer and clearer channels of God, servants of God. And I've never read this before, but here's a quote from the Bible. This is Matthew 13:43. Then the righteous, those who seek the will of God, will shine forth like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. So let's plead that we become brighter and brighter lighthouses that shine forth the light and love and life and healing and mercy of God. Because I personally think that's the meaning of life. To become more and more like our friends Bruno and Christ. Thanks so much for joining in, dear ones. See and feel you soon. Take care. Much love.